It was a May morning in 2026 in the far north of the Philippines. On the sand dunes facing the sea, soldiers carefully positioned a military truck pointed toward the horizon. There wasn't much conversation. Each one knew what was about to happen. 2 missiles were fired. Sand went flying. The noise shook the air. And 6 minutes later, a ship that was 75 kilometers away, in the middle of the sea, was hit. And it sank. On the other side of that same sea, China was watching. And they didn't like what they saw. In response, the Chinese government sent an entire fleet to the region. Destroyers, frigates, spy ships, Coast Guard vessels, all of that to monitor what was happening there in the Philippines. But behind those shots, there's a story that China knows very well. And that explains why the Chinese government is more concerned today than it has been in decades. To understand why that shot was so important, you need to know something about Japan.
The ties with the United States remain strong.
After World War II, Japan was defeated in a humiliating way. The cities had been destroyed. The entire country was in ruins, and the world demanded something very clear in exchange for peace. Never again would Japan use its military forces offensively outside its own territory. Never again would it fire weapons in other countries. This promise was written into the Japanese constitution itself, the most important document in the country. It was like a law set in stone that said, Japan exists to defend itself, never to attack. And for 80 years, Japan has honored this commitment. But on that day, in the dunes of the Philippines, that promise ended. To give you an idea of how big this is, think of it this way. Imagine a country that spent decades promising the whole world that it would never again use its military forces outside its own borders. And then, suddenly, without warning, sent soldiers and missiles into a neighbor's territory. The whole world would stop to pay attention. That's exactly what happened here, only on the other side of the planet. The missiles fired are called Type 88. They are manufactured by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, one of the largest companies in Japan. Each one carries inside it an explosive charge capable of destroying an entire warship. And, until that day, they had never been fired outside Japanese territory. But there are 2 details about this launch that really stand out. The first is about the ship that was sunk. It was called BRP Quezon and had a rather curious history. This ship was built by the United States in 1944. During World War II, precisely to fight Japan. It sailed the seas and did its job. And, decades later, it was handed over to the Philippine Navy. And then, 80 years after it was built to fight against the Japanese, it was sunk by them. This time as allies. The second detail is even more revealing. The Type 88 is an old missile that has been in service for more than 35 years. Japan has much more modern and powerful missiles than that one, kept in Japan. But they chose to use the oldest one in the Philippines. For many analysts, it was a calculated demonstration, big enough to be taken seriously, but contained enough not to escalate too much. It was like opening your jacket and showing the holster without drawing the gun. But after all, why the Philippines? Of all the places in the world, why did a country like Japan choose that place to do something it hadn't done since World War II? Think about that for a second. If you were Japan and wanted to send a message to China without declaring war, where would you do it? What would be the most strategic place possible? To understand the answer, you need to look at the map. Imagine a natural fence in the middle of the ocean. It starts in Japan, up there, it goes down through Taiwan, right in the middle, and it ends in the Philippines, down below. China is on the inside of this fence, and the main exit to the south to the open ocean. to the Pacific proper. It goes through a narrow gate between the Philippines and Taiwan. It's through this gate that China's military ships need to pass to reach the open ocean. It's through it that China is able to operate anywhere in the world. Without it, China is limited to its own waters, like a boxer trapped in the corner of the ring. Strong, but no room to move. Now think about it this way. If you wanted to block someone from leaving a narrow hallway, where would you stand? At the door. And it was exactly at the door of that hallway that Japan, the United States, and the Philippines positioned themselves during that exercise. The northern Philippines, where the missiles were launched from, faces directly toward that gate. A missile launched from there can reach any ship trying to pass between the Philippines and Taiwan. Simply put, any ship that tries to cross that path in case of war is going to have a serious problem ahead, and Japan was not alone. In that same exercise, the United States fired a Tomahawk missile that hit a target more than 600 kilometers away. The Philippines had their own missiles positioned, and together the three countries set up for the first time a network of weapons capable of covering that entire corridor, from beginning to end. There were 17,000 soldiers from 7 different countries: United States, Philippines, Japan, Australia, Canada, France, and New Zealand. The largest military exercise in the history of the Philippines. And the Chinese government understood exactly what that meant. If that corridor can be closed in the event of a conflict, China loses access to the Pacific. Their warships get trapped. Their trade becomes vulnerable. Their ability to act anywhere in the world is compromised. It's not just a military issue. It's a matter of survival, and Japan didn't get here out of nowhere. But do you think a country that promised never to arm itself again could reach this point overnight? Of course not. This change has been happening for years, quietly. And the numbers tell this story better than any speech. For decades, there was an almost sacred rule in Japan: never spend more than 1% of what the country produces on armaments and defense. It was a way to show the world that the country was committed to peace. But over the last 13 years, Japan has increased its military budget every year, without exception. In 2026, that spending reached $70 billion, the largest in the country's history. Just to give you an idea, that's enough money to cover the entire annual budget of several smaller countries. And the plan is to keep increasing it. And behind this change, there are 2 names you need to know. The first is Shinjiro Koizumi, Japan's Minister of Defense. He was there in person on those dunes in the Philippines, watching the launch up close, alongside the Philippine Minister of Defense. He is the son of a famous former prime minister, and he represents a generation of Japanese politicians who grew up in peace, but who believe that only military power can guarantee that this peace continues. The second name is Sanae Takaichi, the Prime Minister of Japan. In November of last year, she said something that no one expected to hear from a Japanese leader. She said that Japan could intervene militarily if China attacked Taiwan. A statement like that, coming from the most powerful person in Japan, would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. The world fell silent for a moment. China reacted with fury, but Takaichi did not back down. Today, Japan has openly taken this position. But there's a question that lingers in the air when you see all this happening. A question that no one asks in official statements, in press conferences, in ministers' speeches. There's a small island in the Philippines called Itbayat. It's just over 150 kilometers from Taiwan. Its inhabitants are fishermen. They live simply, far from the big cities, far from the discussions of generals and ministers. But during this military exercise, that same island was used as a deployment site for American missiles. An island of fishermen became, overnight, part of a military network aimed at China. The residents know that, in the event of a real conflict, they would be in the line of fire. Not because they wanted to be, not because they chose it, but simply because geography put them there. And maybe that's what this whole video is really trying to say deep down. It's not just the fishermen of Itbayat. It's any ordinary person anywhere in the world who wakes up one day and finds out that the world around them has changed without warning. That decisions made by generals and prime ministers in rooms most of us will never enter directly affect the lives of people who had nothing to do with it. The launch in the Philippines in May of 2026 wasn't just a weapons test, it was a message. Japan, which had remained silent for 80 years, chose this moment to show the world, and especially the Chinese government, that it is willing to take action. That the post-war promise has come to an end. That the pacifist Japan the world once knew is slowly being replaced by something different. And China? Well, she got the message. In the days following the exercise, government spokespeople went to the press to talk about Japanese militarism resurfacing, about a threat to peace in the region. They used strong words. The rhetoric of highest alert. But what lay behind the words was something much more concrete. The perception that the encirclement of China is tightening. One military exercise at a time. The world order that has existed since the end of World War II is changing. Not all at once. Not with a declaration of war, but gradually with military exercises, growing budgets, and missiles being fired at sand dunes in the Philippines on a May morning. Japan didn't declare war on anyone, but it sent a message that any general in the world understood. And sometimes a well-delivered message is worth more than any declaration. The question that no one can answer yet is, how far will this go? And when most people realize the scale of this change, it will already be too late to follow it closely. And you, what do you think? Is Japan right to rearm itself? Or is this creating a greater danger for the region? Leave your opinion in the comments. I want to know what you think. If this video helped you better understand what's happening in the world, share it with someone who also wants to know. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the time. We will keep following all of this closely. See you next time.